Good morning, still morning here in Texas. Good morning, everybody. I am Professor Amy Vandiver Novak, a marketing professor of practice in the marketing department at Bauer College of Business. This is my 21st year associated with teaching within this college, and I'm very excited to have a wonderful conversation with an amazing group of women that I'm proud to say that I know personally, and have them share their stories so that you can learn a little bit more about how to implement some key things and topics that we're going to talk about into your life or apply it into your organization. So we welcome all of you. Let's talk. The reason that we want to be able to have this conversation is because women make up almost 50% of the workplace today. And what's important is to recognize their needs and how they engage is different than men. And that doesn't make one better than the other. I'm a product of really wonderful men, starting with my father and two great brothers, as well as awesome mentors who have supported me throughout my career. And now a wonderful husband and have a great stepson as well. But I love my women, right? My girlfriends, and that have supported me since I was 4 all the way to now. And I think it's important that we have honest conversations about how we see and engage in the world differently so that we can work together to create a more effective organization, community, and world at large. So to set the stage for what we're going to do today, we're going to begin with a couple housekeeping items. So first and foremost, if you will mute your video and microphone, that helps save bandwidth and also keeps from distractions. Then we're going to introduce our illustrious panel. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about them and introduce you, and then dive straight in. So we've got a couple topics that each one of them are going to highlight and talk about, and then some overarching ones that all of them are going to weigh in on. And then finally leave the last 15 minutes for audience question and answer. So if you, as you hear something that you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on or have a question in particular, if you will post it in the chat, we will then monitor that at the end. If it's geared towards a particular panelist, that's fine too, if you'd like to ask a question directly to one of them. And then at the end, we will highlight a couple opportunities for more webinars and workshops that the Stephen Stagner Sales Excellence Institute is going to highlight, and then in with a couple closing thoughts. So thanks so much for joining us. Grab a cup of coffee, or for me, it's always a cup of tea. Sit back and get ready to be inspired by our wonderful panel of ladies. I wanted to begin, I'm a big quote person, so if anybody knows me, they know that I'm all about my quotes. And first, kind of paying homage to one of our amazing women leaders that we lost this past Friday, and that is Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said this along with many other inspiring quotes, but first is, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. And so I think that's a great quote. I'm wearing kind of my dissent necklace in honor of her, along with my cougar red, to begin the conversation. So this is our group of esteemed panelists. Lily Jackson is an attorney. So Lily is a Texas licensed attorney and a graduate of the University of Houston, Bauer College of Business, and the Program for Excellence in Selling. She was on one of my very first sales teams where we were able to be in the top 10. During her time at the University of Houston, she graduated with an advanced certification from the Program for Excellence in Selling, and then embarked her career in real estate, which led her to receive her Juris Doctorate degree, her JD in law. While attending law school, Lily clerked for the Honorable Judge Palmer, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Lone Star Legal Aid Real Estate Division, just to name a few. Upon graduating from law school, Lily served as a landman for the Purple Land Management, and currently is a—
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, can everybody make sure that you're muting as you come in? Thank you, I appreciate it. Currently, she is a practicing attorney for the United States Small Business Administration and is a member of the State Bar of Texas Dallas Bar Association, and the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers. She is married to one of our first responders, a Dallas firefighter, and they have 2 young daughters. And most of all, she has a passion for service, giving back to the community. So welcome, Lily. Our next panelist is a friend of mine all the way back to our college days, and that is Jennifer Waldner Grant, who is AIG's first Chief Sustainability Officer. In this role, she is responsible for leading the development and implementation of company-wide sustainability strategy and brings more than 20 years experience and leadership working on matters related to corporate citizenship and sustainability. She's been with AIG 12 years and has held positions of increasing responsibility focused on a couple key areas. Most recently, as head of citizenship for AIG Life and Retirement. Among her responsibilities, she led the Sustainability Task Force, which led her to her position today, oversaw strategic philanthropic partnerships and employee community engagement, and is serving as editor of the company's annual citizenship report. So prior to joining AIG, she spent a decade in citizenship roles at State Street Corporation, including being vice president of the State Street Foundation in Boston, and is one of my great fellow Aggies from Texas A&M University, where she received her degree and then got her master's degree from Boston University with a focus on community relations. She is a fellow at the American Leadership Forum and serves on Geneva Associates Climate Change and Emerging Environmental Working Group and Institute of International Finance's Sustainable Finance Working Group, is married to Jason Grant, and is the mother to her dog Sunny and her daughter Riley. So welcome, Waldner. That's what I've always called her. Welcome, Jen. Their next panelist is Dalia Pineda, and she is the current Director of Advancement for the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. In her current role, she leads fundraising efforts for the college, focusing on building relationships, custom programming, and creating opportunities that align with the vision of alumni, corporate partners, donors, and friends of the college. Her 18-year career with the University of Houston spans experience in teaching, leadership, strategy, marketing, fundraising, corporate relations, and team building. So basically, Dalia kind of runs the place. She was a former director of graduate programs, earned her degree in arts and Hispanic studies from the University of Texas at Austin. So she's a Longhorn, but we love her. And her master's in sociology and cross-cultural studies from the University of Houston, Clear Lake. She is proficient public speaker, certified mediator, and Gallup StrengthsFinder facilitator, as well as a certified diversity inclusion trainer with the National Coalition Building Institute. She is a wife and mother of a daughter and a dog who enjoys cooking, gardening, and kayaking. So welcome, Dalia. Excited to have you a part of the panel as well. And last but certainly not least, we have Candace Saunders. So she is a graduate from the University of Houston in 2015, where she majored in interpersonal communications, minored in marketing, and was also one of my great students who graduated from the program for excellence in selling. She also set her sights high and has received an internship in the White House during the Obama administration, so transferred her life to DC, where she currently resides. After her internship, she landed a position in corporate real estate, and that's where she's been navigating and building relationships. Currently, she is works at JLL as a digital advisor and is passionate about bringing other young women forward by bridging the gap between college and education career readiness for young professionals. And as the current author of the book that encompasses all of that, Happy Professional. So welcome all of you ladies. I'm excited to begin the conversation with you. And so if you'll notice, what we've got is what I wanted to do was have a diverse group from different industries, different backgrounds, but also different parts in their career. So Candace is 5 years out, Lily's about 10, Dalia's around 15, and then Waldner and I are bringing up the 20+ year. But I think that's important for everyone in the group to really understand where they're coming from. So I'm going to begin with you, Candace, since you're the most recent out. And I love that you've always been able to have a real drive and dedication with big vision for what you wanted to accomplish. You had that ever since you were very young, when I first met you in the sales program. So tell me a little bit about where that came from and how that landed you into the White House.
Absolutely. And before I get started, I just want to thank Amy and PES for this opportunity. And if you are in Amy's class, take everything that she says to heart, because if you really follow it, it will take you far in life. And how I ended up in the White House internship, and the best example of my story there, it really started during my senior year in college. So at the beginning of my senior year in college, I had just gotten back from a very amazing internship that I had received through PES. And then at that time, I was trying to decide if I wanted to pursue a full-time opportunity from that company, or if I wanted to go into event planning, which I had a really strong interest in at that time. And at that time, I decided to pursue event planning. So when I made that decision, I decided that I needed to get experience in it. And the thought that came to my head was, why don't I go get experience at the White House? And I didn't have any connections there, but it was just a thought I couldn't get rid of. And at that time, I was also an assistant program manager, and I was also in key accounts. So for key accounts, you normally have like weekly or maybe bi-weekly mock interviews. And I remember going to John Pingle's office and telling him I wanted to mock role play for the White House. And at first, I think he thought I was joking, but I was serious. And so I remember we did a mock role play for that, and the cat was out of the bag. Everyone knew that I wanted to go to the White House. And we were starting to prepare for our very first key account call. And so when you're preparing for your key account calls, you do mock presentations. And I remember being in John Pingle's office again with the rest of my team, and we were going around a circle talking about what is going to be our fun fact that we share. And I wanted to say that my fun fact was that I had been to 50 states. And John did not think that was interesting. And so he told me that I should focus on saying that I wanted to intern at the White House. Now, in my head, that was the last thing I wanted to say, because if I didn't get it, I was going to be very embarrassed. So regardless of what I was thinking, I decided to say it. And in my very first key account call, I do the introduction. I say that I'm interested in applying to the White House. And after the key account call, I send follow-up emails to everyone. And I get an email back from one gentleman, and he says, I actually know somebody in the Obama administration. If you'd like me to connect you, I will. So he ends up connecting me to someone who worked in the Chamber of Commerce, who was actually appointed by President Obama. So that made my first connection into the White House. And from that, I learned that you really don't know who people know. So I took that with me. And a few months after that, I found myself in an entrepreneur volunteer event, the Bauer Entrepreneurship Group. And I met two girls who I'd never met before. And I said to them, I'm interested in applying to the Obama or the White House internship. Do you know anybody? And surprisingly enough, they knew a girl who had just completed the White House internship who went to University of Houston downtown. And she played a huge mentorship role for me. And that made my second connection to the White House. And then following that, I kept thinking, I have to keep finding other people. So on LinkedIn, you have the ability to go to a company and see who works there and then find a mutual connection. So I did that under the White House, and I found a lady who worked there, and she actually knew the student body vice president of the campus. Luckily, I was in Student Government Association my freshman year, so I was really good friends with him. He ended up I asked him to connect me. He ended up connecting me, and that made my third connection. So by then, I thought I was a shoo-in. I know like 3 people in the White House. I'm golden. And I ended up submitting my application for fall 2015. So I do the whole waiting process, and I'm like, I got this. And I ended up getting an email like mid-September, and because I'm always checking all the pings on my phone, and it says, we regret to inform you that you did not get the internship. And I just remember thinking, like, this is not right. I know people there. I should be able to get in. And I didn't really want to tell anybody. And I'm also really strong in my faith. So I felt like, God opened too many doors. I'm getting in. So I reached back out to everybody who I had made connections with and asked them to recheck my application, and decided to not let that no stop me, and then reapply again for the spring semester, which was spring 2016. And a few weeks later, after submitting it, I got an email inviting me to one of many interviews and for the internship process. And then a few months later, on November 2nd, 2015 at 2:32 p.m., I got the email that changed my life, that said I was accepted. And so ultimately from that, I really learned that you don't know who other people know and who can really help you. And then also I didn't let that no stop me either, which you learn so much in PES. And then the final thing is, like, when you're achieving such an ambitious goal, you do it alone to some degree. So not being afraid to achieve something so great alone, because when you eventually get there, you'll find so many other like-minded people. So that's a little bit about how I achieved that internship and was able to take that opportunity.
That's amazing. So, and I, first of all, we do this a lot in the personal branding class I talk, you put it out there, right? So you owned the goal and you told people, and then the universe and connections were able to do that. And again, it is always about the relationships that you have. So congratulations on achieving it. We're really proud of you. Dahlia, so we're going to transition over to you. You've had an amazing career here at the University of Houston, in particular at Ballard. Dahlia is well respected amongst everybody, faculty, staff, and her peers. And she works primarily with a lot of female-dominated industries. So tell me a little bit about what that has meant for you and how you've been able to build relationships and help empower other women, or what you've learned from that.
Well, thank you very much. And it's always great to hear our young alumna talk. So Candace, thank you. You feel energized and you're like, you're going to go for the world, because sometimes you need that reminder and that energy, right? But so thanks, Amy. And yes, this marks my 18th year with U of H and 14th with Power. So I've grown up, as I tell people, career-wise within the college. And, you know, when we were talking about the questions for the panel, one of the things that I mentioned to Amy was, when you talk about women in leadership, we talk a lot about being in male-dominated, industries. And there's a uniqueness when you are in a, quote, female-dominated industry, right? Now, not that that's in every section of higher education, but in the staff area, you know, I don't have a PhD. I'm not a faculty member. I'm an adjunct faculty member, but I'm not a full PhD faculty member, right? So there's always that discrepancy. There are groups, right, within higher education. And in staffing and administration, there are a lot of women. So one of the things that I have learned the most that are really coming into play now are that, you know, one of the biggest calls for me was a few years ago, whenever I realized that the diversity does not equal inclusion, right? And we all know that. We've been hearing about it a lot. You know, you have an organization where there are a lot of any group, and when you have a group with a lot of women, sometimes you do have to be very careful to make sure that they're also included in that first quote that you said, Amy, right, where decisions are being made. And I'm wearing my distinct colored earrings today too, in honor of RBG. But there was it's a story that I share that actually shared at a faculty staff meeting, shared my thoughts around with a couple of hundred of us. But we were an office of about 99% women and 90% women of color. And some of these women that I respect very much, who are still there, have given going more than 2 decades to that particular office, to that work. And it goes back to understanding institutional knowledge, right, and the value of it. And there was a task force put together to make decisions about the very things that these women led and worked on, et cetera. And the task force was made up of 6 white males. So whenever it came up in conversation, it was one of those things that, you know, several of us were very open at a certain point to talk about, you know, include people. You know, it's not just celebrating the diversity of it, but include it. And I think that, especially in a group with women, it's one of those things where we have to be really careful to understand. And, you know, when you get into topics of compensation and everything, we're great at balancing, right? So we're really good at, well, I don't get this, but I get this. I don't get this, but I get this, you know, I don't get paid this, but boy, I have flexibility and so on. I don't get paid this. So then we stop losing track of what we're contributing. And then we stop losing track of keeping that value. And then we never really work up that bravery to go up and say, I am worth this, or this whole group is worth this, and this is what it should be. So that's the biggest thing that I have learned being in a female-dominated industry, in that particular sense, in terms of dominated in the sense, that's probably not the right word, but a lot of female representation, is we have to really be careful with not letting that comfort zone get so big that it starts squashing other thoughts and ideas and wants that you have. So
that's so true. And it's one of those things where I think sometimes we're raised to be okay with what we're given. And and you don't want to necessarily be, I am woman, hear me roar, even though I was raised with brothers where I did have to roar quite a bit. But at the same time, it is about embracing, this is what I contribute, and done, like, and stop talking, kind of situation around that. I had the opportunity to learn kind of that stuff. And in my first place that I grew into leadership, the students who have know my story that I've talked to, was at Texas A&M. I got really involved in the leadership opportunities through the traditions. And that's actually where I met Jen, who I've called Waldner ever since. And so she has led, me to open other doors. We did a study abroad. We were also co-chairs together. And she was the one that took the first, that I met that one day on campus, that led me to go to London. So Jen, I want you to talk a little bit about, especially to our younger audience, what are some things that you had inside of you that, you said, okay, I'm going to take this, similar to what Candace was talking about, that also you've been able to cultivate and develop to get you where you are today, which is the first Chief Sustainability Officer at a global company?
Well, thank you, Amy. And it's great to be here today with this great group of women. And I'll try very hard not to call you Vanderveer, which I've been calling you since our college days. But, I would say, I was very fortunate back in college to have the opportunity to be involved in a number of leadership roles through extracurricular activities. And they definitely influenced my career path. First, I guess I should confess that I had 5 different majors in college until I finally landed on psychology. And even then, I really had no clue what I was going to do after graduation. And so, some of the organizations that I got involved with, I think, not only helped me round out my college experience, but also taught me some valuable lessons that you don't always learn in the classroom. And I think by taking on those leadership roles, I learned about how to lead diverse groups of people and how to collaborate. I would say, I think I learned how to forge my own path and figure out things that I had no prior exposure to or experience with. And so I think that those really set the foundation for my career path through those early experiences in those organizations and some of those leadership roles. I think one of the most notable experiences I had, in addition to meeting you, Amy, through our freshman orientation camp co-chair experience, is that I was a part of our student government organization. It was a student chapter of the United Way that I got involved with. I got on the leadership team, and I led our marketing and PR for this student chapter of the United Way, which is a social service organization that gives back to the community. And I had zero background in public relations, really had to figure out it all for my own, as far as how to write a press release, how to really communicate to other people to get them to really buy into what we were trying to do and get them involved. And, I would say that really opened my eyes, that experience, to a potential career path that I had never really considered, where I really loved the idea of the communications aspect of it, but I also love the element of being able to give back and have an impact on the community. And so that really planted a seed for me and led me to explore opportunities for careers after I graduated from college. And right after I graduated, I was very fortunate to get an internship at a regional bank here in Houston, working in their marketing department. And most of the work that I did was focused on their community outreach with their customers. And it really helped me to understand that, there's actually a career path here. And so the idea of corporate social responsibility was a new concept to me because I think it was more of an evolving field at that time. I think now pretty much every company is focused on corporate responsibility. It's really ingrained into the DNA of most companies at this point. But over 20 years ago, it was more of evolving. And so fortunately for me, that led to me going to Boston University to get my master's degree in public relations with a focus on community relations. And from there, I landed my first job at State Street, where I was for 10 years in their citizenship department doing corporate responsibility work. So really taking my communication skills and being able to use those to help build the company's brand and image in the communities where we operated. And I would just say I learned so much from those early opportunities, and it didn't stop with college. And so even as I progressed through my career and even today, I still try to get involved with what I call extracurricular activities outside of my day job. And I've had leadership roles within those. And they've really helped me to continue to hone my leadership skills, my networking opportunities, and really open doors for me. So my advice to everyone is, never stop looking for ways to get involved, even if it's, outside of what your day job is.
That's fantastic. And I can completely attest to Waldner's good heart and how she has always gone above and beyond in sharing that, her talents and her experience outside of the workplace, which goes back to what Candace was talking about, which you never know who's going to be able to connect and how you're going to be able to learn from those people. All right. So Lily, Waldner kind of talked a little bit about understanding the different majors and the career path that it took her on. And that leads me to you with, you've always had big dreams and a wonderful belief in yourself, all the way from being a student, and just a positive energy. But you also kind of took a while to kind of figure out that law was really where you wanted to be. So talk a little bit about your journey and about how it's okay to figure out you're not necessarily going to know it from day one.
For sure. And I want to say thank you too for allowing me to be on the panel. To answer your question, when I first graduated from the University of Houston, I embarked upon a career in real estate at the time, and I was working for Pulte Homes. I was selected from the Program for Excellence in Selling to work there. So through there, I discovered my inner power that I had. I was placed in communities where the sales performance were low, but then I was able to take that community and take it to a different level. So as I grew into that, I eventually opened up my own business. It was a fashion truck, and I took that it was the first minority fashion truck opened in Houston. I took that and grew that business as well. And from that, I learned that you might not have a direct career path from the beginning. Like you may not stay in real estate from the beginning, or you may not stay being an entrepreneur from the beginning, but the key things that you learned there are the things that you can take with you throughout. So from my first experience at Pulte, when I discovered my power that I had to just take things and create it and make it bigger, I kept applying that to each sector of my life. And so that led me to say, I think I want to go to law school. I want to, and now I'm on the path of opening up my own title company, because there's only one African-American owned title company here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so those same concepts from Pulte to now is what kind of led me here. So it's okay if you don't have it all figured out. It's okay if it's not a clear, clean-cut path, but the point of it is the things that you learn along the way will kind of just build on top to the next one. And then with that being said, I know that we were speaking about being married to a first responder in the middle of this pandemic has been another challenge that I had to take what I learned from college to now. At the time when we were having our second child, my husband his particular station had got a COVID scare. And so during that time, there was only one person allowed to come into the hospital with you when you're delivering the baby. And obviously it was going to be my husband, but we thought he had to be quarantined. Literally, she was born that Monday. He was quarantined that Wednesday before. Thank God it wasn't the person didn't end up having COVID. So he was released to come back home through us. But even with that, I still had to prepare myself like, okay, you're going to be okay. If you have to deliver this baby in this room by yourself with the nurses, you're going to be okay. You know, just calm down. We're going to work through the process. So you just never know what life is going to throw at you, and take what you learn from every step and apply it to every aspect of your life.
That's awesome, Lily. And the thing is, what would be the thing that you think that you've been able to, you talked about the different things that you're learning. What have you learned from this COVID situation that you didn't necessarily had before? Because you have a responder, right? You had a pregnancy and you had a baby and you're navigating all of that during quarantine. That's a lot. So what do you think is bubbled to the top saying, this is something I didn't know about myself?
Once again, the inner power, the same inner power that I had when I was at Pulte, when I was taking communities that were low performing and making them outperforming. The same power that I had to have with a newborn baby in the middle of a pandemic, with a husband who has to go out and go to work. You know, we're lucky enough to stay at home, but he's on the front lines. He has to go out and expose himself. So I just think that inner power is what is going to get you through the next step. The inner power to not say no, the inner power to not allow yourself to look at the current situation and become negative or upset. I could have been really distraught and depressed if my husband wasn't there with me having birth. I was having birth to our second baby. I'm like, oh my God, she's not going to be here. But I said, you know what? This is going to be a story to tell in her baby book. We're going to put it down in the books for that. So you just have to take everything and make it positive and stay positive and realize your inner strength. So that's the main thing that I learned.
That's wonderful. And that will go far. It goes back to that fortitude and grit that I think women have in spades, the resiliency that they're able to do that. And let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. So, Dahlia, I know that you are homeschooling your child who is wonderful and creative, but needs people. So tell me about how you're managing that while you're dealing with donors that you can't go see, and managing being a teacher for her. And what are the key lessons that you can, if you've got other, people listening in that they're dealing with that?
Yeah, well, I feel that I am lucky in that I have a job where I focus on relationships, right? So the wonderful thing is that I have wonderful alumni, wonderful donors that I work with, and I check on them and they know about my family, I know about theirs. So she has joined, she was a proud member of our commercial banking board meeting a few months ago. She has sat at the table, literally at our dining room table, while I have been in certain conversations that have been very interesting to have a 9-year-old girl listen to. And she's actually given me a little bit of advice on some major gifts and asks that I've been working on, which is, it's fascinating. If you have that opportunity, I think my advice is include them. Or if they are the type of child who, Amy knows my daughter, that's why, if they are the type of child who need that attention, they will seek it out. And of course, this is if they're at the right age and everything else. She showed up on our Zoom meeting a few days ago, right, with a lock of hair. It was sticking out. She just cut it. And I just take the lock of hair and put it down. And I'm like, hey, hair grows back. Let's move on. And that's what you have to do. You have to just let things go. And if you can involve them. The transparency of, I'm tired. This is very hard for me. In the spring, we were adjusting. Now we're a little bit more adjusted. Having those open conversations, because regardless, your children will know. They will know if you're not okay. And if you're pretending to be, there's this, I don't know, after 9 years with her, I'm like, she'll literally ask, do you need to go lay down? Do you need to cry? Do you need a minute? It's gotten a lot better, but the first few months were difficult. My husband's also a first responder. He's not here 13, 14 hours of the day, every day. And that you're alone a lot. And so you have to make sure they don't hear you constantly say that and say, okay, where can I include you? What can I let go? What's not a big deal? Messy house, not a big deal. You got to let stuff go.
I love that. And I think what's hard for, I don't want to say type A women like us, but, we're type A because we go and get things done. But I think sometimes because of that, it puts us in a space where being vulnerable is hard. And I think the benefit and the blessing that has come out of the coronavirus is we all got stuff, and it's not been easy for anyone. And that allows us to be more vulnerable and therefore a little bit more compassionate around that. And that goes back to you, Jen. We've had lots of conversations around what do we do in these circumstances and what's right and what's wrong, particularly in when you have family, you know, older parents that you're concerned about. But then you also are working at home with your husband. So tell me a couple ways in which you've navigated that you think might empower some of the audience, and some insight that you've learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think I have a 3-year-old daughter. And so when the pandemic hit, she was suddenly at home with full time with my husband and I, who were both working at home, which is not normal for us. Typically we have a shared office that we use occasionally, but all of a sudden we found ourselves sharing an office, you know, 5 days a week, 40 hours plus. And it was challenging. And I think you know, I'm a little envious of Dahlia and Lily in a way that your husband's left. Because we got to a point where I thought, you know, this is not good for our marriage to be sharing this office. And I think the best thing that happened to us is that my husband finally moved upstairs to a different room, and we had a lot of separation, which was great. But, you know, the other challenge that we had was, you know, having our daughter at home, which she was normally in daycare full time. And for 2 months, she was with us full time as we tried to navigate work. Had a lot of appearances of her on video conferences where, you know, I think it did help to sort of humanize us with our colleagues as we saw that happening with other people as well. I think, you know, you kind of get a glimpse into people's homes. And I think that, you know, Amy, as you were saying, I think that's maybe one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that you kind of get an appreciation that, look, you know, we're all doing the best that we can. Dahlia, I'm with you. My house has not been clean in, you know, over 6 months now. And, you know, being a type A myself, I found that I've had to let a lot of stuff go. I think with my daughter's care, we were very fortunate that my mom and sister stepped up to take care of her full time for the last 4 months. And you know, that was great, but we had a divided family in how we were approaching COVID. So my side of the family was being extremely cautious. My husband's side of the family was much more open and not maybe as, you know, concerned as we were. But because my side of the family was watching my daughter, we really had to sort of adhere to their level of caution. And so, you know, that was another challenge too, trying to navigate, you know, how do we interact with our families when they have different views around, you know, how they want to be showing up during this time. And so, you know, that was one other thing that I think created a lot of stress on it, quite honestly, because my husband and I were more in the middle of the road. And now our situation has flipped because we just sent our daughter back to her daycare 2 weeks ago. And now we're kind of on the outside of my family, and now we're interacting with my husband's family more. So, you know, I think we're all just doing the best that we can right now, taking it one day at a time. And I think that's all any of us can really do.
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting. And I think what's interesting is to realize the small things don't matter. And for me, that's been really challenging, is to realize you don't have the control. You do have, like Lily said, the inner power to persevere, but you don't necessarily have the control. And so I do want to talk a little bit about Candace, because Candace, you're in a different situation because you are by yourself. You know, you live by yourself in the DC area, so you're virtually working from home. How do you stay connected, and how do you do some self-care, you know, to still build the relationships to make an impact in your career while you're isolated?
Absolutely. Right now, in my current role, I do a lot of communication. And so sometimes it's helpful to have like a balance. So if I'm talking all day, and after the workday's over, to decompress and have that balance of where I'm not communicating at some point. So first it's like having or trying to establish some type of balance there. But in terms of socialization, what I'll do are virtual hangouts. So whether that's through House Party, which is an app where you can play games with other people, and there's Netflix Party, and you can watch Netflix movies with others. And that's something that I'll do to socialize if I'm not doing social distance hangout where they're 6 feet away. But if it's not including that, something that I also do that helps me during COVID is I do a really good job where I focus on removing friction. So I'm also working right now, and it can be stressful at times because I have a leadership role and I'm supporting like 3 states. And so if it gets really stressful and I might miss a meal, I might miss breakfast. So I live in Washington, D.C. I don't have a car. I walk everywhere. I'll take the metro. So what I do to remove the friction is I order all my meals. I order breakfast from Daily Harvest, and I order lunch and dinner from Factor. So if I get stressed or I have 5 Zoom calls back to back, I always make sure that I get a meal in, or now all my meals in. And so that's been really helpful during COVID as well. And I think also going on walks. And in addition to walks, to really help to focus more back on the socialization, I'm a huge learner. So thankfully, I've been fortunate and blessed to stay healthy during this time period. So I use my spare time to either watch a class on Masterclass or Skillshare, or learn a new skill, or join an online group or community, like a Facebook group, and connect with others there. So that's currently what I'm doing right now during COVID.
Those are great pieces of advice that every single one of us, can take. And I love the idea that you order all your food. That in itself that's huge self-care. That and a 15-minute walk, or teaching yourself, those are all wonderful pieces of advice, because every single one of us are navigating such difficult times. What I want to transition to now is a little bit more around compensation. Dahlia talked a little bit about this, and I think it's important, and I'm going to start with you, Jen, because you were the first, your passion for sustainability and contributing back led you to lead the task force. And I know your story, and I know your journey, that then the CEO said, we want you to do this. And you're a little bit like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? So I want you to talk a little bit, and we'll open it up to the rest of the ladies, about your own kind of struggle to say hell yes, which, by the way, if you're a student of mine, you know that I reference this book, or anybody else, the Hell Yes book. Jen is the person that gave that to me about 12 years ago, and it sits on my desk. I mention it all the time. So tell me a little bit about how at first you weren't quite sure it was the hell yes, and then how you had the conversation to, now that you were going to be in the C-suite, to get the compensation you deserved.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because sustainability has been something I've been passionate about for many years. I formed a sustainability working group that was sort of a grassroots effort more than 5 years ago. That led a couple of years later to me and a few people from that group presenting to our CEO the idea of really formalizing a sustainability strategy at the company. And fortunately, he agreed. And as you're mentioning, Amy, during that meeting, he asked, well, have you thought about who's going to lead this group? My manager at the time looked at me and said, well, she's been at this from the beginning. So the CEO looked at me and said, well, you want to lead this task force? And what do you say when your CEO asks you? But you say yes. So, inside I was freaking out because I, had no idea what that was going to entail. But it led to a year-long effort with a cross-functional team, a sustainability task force. We were charged with developing a sustainability strategy for the company. And part of that work was creating sort of a governance structure and creating a sustainability office. And we wanted a chief sustainability officer to be hired to lead the function. And it's interesting because never during any of that time of me starting a sustainability working group and being asked to lead the sustainability task force did I ever consider myself for the role of chief sustainability officer, which I've done a lot of introspection around because, I was really the driving force in really advancing our sustainability agenda, but I just, having never actually done the role before, just never pictured myself taking it on. I thought, we need someone that's more senior than I am. We need someone that's done this before. And our headquarters is based in New York, and I live in Houston, and I was not willing to relocate. And so I never even considered it. And then one of our executive sponsors of our sustainability task force called me into his office to say, thank you for putting together the job description for the chief sustainability officer role. It's very thorough. And by the way, we want you to take this job. And I kind of gave him all those excuses I just shared. I'm not senior enough. I've never done this, and I don't want to relocate. And he said, well, number one, we'll make you senior enough. Number two, you can stay in Houston as long as you're willing to relocate or to come to Houston or to New York whenever needed. And then three, we know you've never done this job, but we really value your relationships and the leadership that you've demonstrated over these last several years. And so shortly after that, same day, I was asked to go meet with our CEO, who basically said the same thing. We want you to take on this job. And, as far as compensation goes, that's when I really did have that conversation with him. And as much as I didn't think about myself first for the role, once it was offered to me, I thought, this is my opportunity to ask for what I want, because what do I have to lose? I mean, the worst they can do is tell me no. I still have a job here. So in some ways, I feel like I was in a really good position. But I just told the CEO, look, I just want to make sure that my position is senior enough where I have sort of the respect and support of our colleagues globally. Otherwise, I don't see like this will be successful. And I want to ensure that I have support not only from you, but from all of your direct reports, your executive leadership team. Otherwise, I don't think we'll be successful. And he agreed. And the compensation package that I ended up getting, the job level that I got, was exactly what I was hoping for. And I just, never thought I would have received that without having those conversations and actually building that job description in such a way where it was a very high level position. And so I just feel like what I've learned from this is, first of all, to believe in yourself, even though you've never done something before, to know that you're passionate about it and determined enough that you can do it. And there's this great quote from Tina Fey. She says, say yes and figure out the rest later. And so that's what I've been doing. I said yes, and now I spent the past year trying to figure out, what the hell I'm doing. But you know what? It was worth it. And, I spent a lot of days being very uncomfortable because I don't have all the answers, but I'm just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and, just really owning this role. So it's been a great part of my journey.
That's wonderful. And I think that's, if any of us it goes back to the whole COVID thing, like getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and like Lily saying, using the inner power to move forward is really key. So we're kind of out of time. We've had other topics to cover, but I do want to leave Q&A open. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the finalists before we open it up for Q&A is, what is going to be the hell yes that you're going to take on for yourself for the rest of 2020? And we'll begin with you, Dahlia.
My hell yes is I am getting more and more comfortable with receiving. And what that means is if someone, and I started learning this after Hurricane Harvey, Amy was a great coach during that time, but anytime you go through something difficult and people reach out and say, what can I do? You can actually answer them and they will help you. It's this fascinating thing that you don't have to do everything for yourself that I learned. And it's just come back this year. So really understanding receiving and, how that can strengthen your relationships in your life. Yeah.
And that's so true, because naturally women they're better givers. And it's hard to ask or also receive. Thank you for sharing that. Lily?
My hell yes would be believe in yourself, because you can manifest anything you put your mind to. Anything. It will come into fruition within due time and within God's plan. So that's my hell yes for the rest of the year.
I love it. I love it. Can we let's manifest a vaccine so that we can get it out again. Right. I know. Put that power of prayer and good manifestation out there. That's right. Candace, what about you?
Yes, my hell yes is going to be boundaries. Boundaries doesn't necessarily mean telling somebody no. It could just be an example of saying, yes, I can do this, but I can finish it, or I can do it after I finish this other task, or setting up time frames. If you have people that love to call you all the time, I can call you at 5 o'clock and I have to be off at a hard stop at 6 o'clock. So just setting up those boundaries is so helpful. So that's what I'm going to keep doing for the rest of 2020.
That is so true. And you got a total shout out from Miss Naomi Coastman over there that says, OMG, yes. That's so true, because we think saying no is being negative, rather than setting boundaries means I get to show up better for myself and for you. All right, Wellner, we're going to end it with you sorry, Jen, for your hell yes.
Yeah, on a similar theme, I think my hell yes is actually scheduling time for me. I think, working at home, the boundaries between work and home life get very blurred. And I think I've noticed that I'm not carving that time out to, go exercise or go just have some quiet time. And so that is my hell yes. And maybe taking a page from Candace's book of ordering more food to be delivered.
Well, those are all wonderful advice, and I am always grateful that you ladies have crossed my path. I have learned from you and been inspired by each of you, and I hope that, I'm confident that you have done the same for the audience today. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and ask if anybody has questions to go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll facilitate. Or if you want, you can just unmute yourself too. But some people, I think, are audio only and they don't have. Okay, so this comes from eWrite2 that says, can any of you discuss a moment when you felt imposter syndrome? And so I'm going to take the liberty of explaining that a little bit. But basically, when you felt that you weren't authentically yourself, I hope I'm interpreting that correctly, eWrite2. Anyone want to take that?
I can answer that very briefly. I think, this is sort of a continuation of what I was discussing before, but I think having never been in a C-suite and now being in the C-suite, I've at times definitely felt like, do I really deserve to be here? Do I fit in here? And, I've actually shared this with a few close confidants. And I think, what's been helpful is that they said, you have the background, more than anyone else at this company. So you do deserve to be here. And so I just, I want to encourage anyone that's felt that way to know that, you are enough, and, believing in yourself can really help cure a lot of things, including the imposter syndrome.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead, Dahlia.
Oh, no, I was just going to add to that, because as I was listening to Jen's story, it was a very similar story for me, but I was not told yes, right? So it was one of those things where all the parts were there, but because of the organizational structure and where I was and what I talked about earlier, right, kind of being a bit different, and that your qualifications or your titles or whatever are different, the way that they like to promote within certain organizations, I was told everything's there. All of these, you have all of this information, institutional knowledge. Don't leave, but we can't give you this. But we'll bring somebody else in and you can help everything be really successful. And I realized at that moment, that's what I had been doing for more than a decade, and being promoted and so on for it. But the reality was I had to leave what was very comfortable and what was very important to me. So I understand about being paralyzed by that fear, because it paralyzed you for like a year or two, for me personally. And then I realized that you have to find ways to do it, whether it's within the organization, but a different place, whether it's starting, your own company, which I recently did with a partner. So it's one of those things where you have to, if the door isn't open right there, which Jen, I'm so happy that it was, and that happened for some of us, that it won't. And that's, you know what, it's okay, because there's another door somewhere else. You're just gonna have to just go figure it out, carve it in the wall, whatever. So, yeah.
And I think, because I do know your story, Dahlia, and I think the biggest thing is, and hopefully that's a key takeaway that I do think is a theme today, is you have to know your own value more than anybody else. And because if you don't believe in yourself, then who else should believe in you? And I think that's what I really hope people understand around the importance of knowing you contribute and you should be valued for your contribution. We've got a good question from Naomi. She says, thanks so much, ladies. Always being in tech sales, I wanted to ask if you ever encountered being treated differently maybe even disrespected or talked down to, and how you would react to that way. So I'm actually gonna ask Candace to take the lead on this, because this was similar to one of the topics that we wanted to talk about, because you are a minority woman in a predominantly white male industry, commercial real estate. So if you'll give a little insight to Naomi, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share a little bit about working in a male-dominated industry and touch on some of what you mentioned. So before, I actually did not know I was entering a male-dominated industry until I got to orientation. And I had flown from Texas to DC. I walked in and I realized that there are not a lot of women here, and there was not a lot of African-American women in the room. And so 3 things have really helped me with that. I think the first thing is, I've heard this saying that a lot of things in your past are preparing you for what you're ultimately walking into. So there's many times where I've seen, or I've been the only person of color, or there's 2 other people, like my sister and someone else. And what that has taught me is to be comfortable in your own skin. So I think the first thing is being comfortable who you are. You don't have to be a person of color, but just being comfortable being a woman, or if you are, being comfortable in your skin. And the second thing that I will touch on in terms of being like disrespected is, well, before I get to the disrespected part, is I once learned when I was at the White House that they said, you will go into rooms where you'll see that you will be the only person that looks like you. And don't run from that. Don't be afraid of that. And to embrace it, because more than likely you're paving the way for someone else to come after you. And another thing I would say in terms of being disrespected, it really depends on the context of the situation. It might be that you're young, you're ambitious, you're well-spoken, you're well-dressed, you know your information, and someone might feel threatened by you coming there, and you might not necessarily want their job, but you never know what's going in their head. And just understand that everybody has weaknesses, and if it's not directly impacting your job, I would avoid the confrontation unless it needs to be addressed. In terms of being disrespected or talked down to. But of course, I wouldn't let anybody disrespect you. In terms of myself, have I ever been disrespected? I have, thankfully, I have not been disrespected, but I don't allow myself to be disrespected. So I carry myself in a way that if they are to say something, they know that I'm confident in myself. So I would do a self-reflection and think of how you're carrying yourself, because you attract what you put out. So if you're putting out that you're confident, you're well-spoken, you know your information, it's really going to help you. So the next time that happens, I would ask, like, 1, pick your battles. And 2, is this going to matter 6 months from now? And if it's not, then maybe don't pick that battle. But that's what I would say if you find yourself in that situation.
That's great advice, Candace. And I think it's also then realizing, sometimes asking with kindness, is there something that is a concern to you? And seeing if you can get the noise in their head. And a lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with you, or it might have been something that was, again, like Candace was saying, taken out of context. And anytime you ask for clarification, you remove your own craziness, like making it bigger than it is, and you also figure out what's really going on. So I would encourage that to add to a little bit about Candace saying. So thanks for great advice. Dana asked, and Candace, Naomi said, great advice, thanks. So Dana said, what advice could you give to reach your level of success given the sector's gender gap, especially among leadership? And I'm just going to chime in here really quick before I allow some of you. It starts with your very first job. Okay. It starts with your very first job and doing the research and communicating value, because then there's no gap that can create over time. So that's my 2 cents. I'm going to hand it over to the rest of you to chime in.
I think that in terms of Lily, you unmuted right when I did. Go ahead. No, you go first.
I would say you cannot allow yourself an excuse, if that makes sense. Like, even though obviously you're going to be of a certain race, you're going to be of a certain gender, and you're going to be trying to achieve things that are bigger than you or bigger than yourself, you kind of have to get to a space where you quiet that noise or when you have to get to a space, you can quiet that noise and get to the next level. So in essence, don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Just do your best, show up and give the best that you have to give. And then you're going to get there, no matter your gender, no matter your race, because no one person can prevent you from getting or becoming the best you that you can become. So that's what I would say to that.
Well, and just to add to that.
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
No, we're on time, right? Well, just really quickly to add to Lily's point is you will, and I think that to the point that Amy added to Candace's comment, we do have a responsibility as women, and those of us who are women of color and white women who support all women and women of color, to ask those questions, as Amy said, to get there, because silence also doesn't move the needle and can be very dangerous in the sense of bringing those things out. And you constantly have to find your purpose. So if you are doing your best and you're finding yourself still with equity issues within an organization that only promotes certain people who fit, or whatever their word is, and that can be across a variety of spectrums, then perhaps you need to listen to your purpose and your heart a little more and get out of the comfort zone and make other choices and do some research on company culture. So it can happen, but there's so much legwork to be done on your own too. So just wanted to add that for that equity piece. But
all right. Well, Steve, you got a question, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for the rest of everybody else. So if the panel wants to stay on to answer your question, if you're available, that'd be good. But first, I would like to thank all of you for investing your time. Time is the most valuable thing every single one of us have. We had about 70 people on, so hopefully it was worth your time to hear from these ladies. And the other thing is, thank you so much for ladies for sharing your story. I admire every single one of you, and I know that you provided insight for everybody else. And so to end with a final quote, real quick, there is a couple workshops, fall workshops, so free webinars, Selling in the Digital Age, which will be November the 3rd, and Digital Branding, which is December the 3rd, Digital Selling Tools on October the 22nd, and Creative Problem Solving on November the 19th. So we wouldn't be the sales program if we did not plug the other opportunities available. And did you know that we do have sales leadership certification? We just did our first virtual one in August. It was great. We're doing another virtual one in January. And I want to end with a final quote, because I think that hopefully you've got power and momentum leaving today's conversation to move the needle forward, as Dahlia mentioned. And this is the final quote from Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So thank you again for your time and attention. And thank you again, panelists, for your inspiration and your wisdom.
And were we going to answer Steve?
Yeah, so Steve, if you want to stay on and ask, you mentioned about doing it video. Is he still on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I thought that, hi. I thought you all's presentation, on a lot of these matters was very important. Specifically, Dahlia and Lily, it's something that you responded to kind of struck me, and I want to get more of you all's perspectives on how do you balance, especially with PES, we learned the importance of being assertive, on the scale of, being expressive and dominant versus amiable and whatnot. But how do you balance that, not stereotype, but that challenge, that, not just women face, but also people of color in terms of trying to be assertive versus, being labeled aggressive, so you can, be able to demonstrate leadership abilities?
I've had to learn to embrace that, to answer your question. Being a Black woman, I am very assertive, and that could come off as aggressive at times. I think the only thing that has calmed that side of me down is being married to my husband, who's like, what? Can you repeat that? Tell me again. So I would say you're going to have to embrace that side of you. And as you embrace it, you will learn when to turn it on, when to turn it off, when to say, okay, let me step back. I'm doing a little bit too much at this moment. Or maybe I need to amp it up and do a little bit more. But I think as you grow older, professionally and age-wise, you will learn when to turn the dial up and when to turn the dial down. But embrace it, because I have that same issue. And for years, I've ran from it. And for years, I have shied down in situations because I never wanted people to feel like I was being aggressive. But by me shying down or by me not embracing it, I wasn't able to receive all of the opportunities that moment could have gave me. That's why I'm telling you to embrace it. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
You know, Steve, that's a really good question. And to add to Lily's point, I think that it is important to embrace. I think 10 years ago, and how far into your career are you, Steve, like post-undergrad right now?
Oh yeah, I'm way post-grad. I'm like 10 years, but I still try to connect with people.
Yeah, and that was around the time, if I were to go back 8 years, right? So that's when I was 10 years in. I wish that I had more of that conversation, because I think what can happen a lot, and you may be familiar with the term of code switching, and we talk a lot about this in the diversity and inclusion space, right? To where for certain groups, it's like, okay, I shut the door and I go to work and I'm this. And that's exhausting. I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to type it into the chat here. And it's Mary Frances Winters, and it's the Winters Group. And this is a leader for the last about 30 years in diversity and inclusion coaching with organizations. She has really, really good books. Follow her on LinkedIn. She talks about these issues specifically. And as an African-American woman, her perspective is very unique. And it's one of those things where it is embraced. It's not necessarily that it is turning on and turning off, to an extent, but that can also be exhausting. So you got to really measure yourself, right? But then we all are in a really unique time where people are noticing that we were having to turn things on and off, and people are noticing like, ooh, maybe that wasn't good. And we're like, you think? So we're in a time now where you can actually say, this is really what I mean by that. And to Amy's point again, it's so powerful, asking questions, right? So if there is an interaction where something happens to where you're like, ooh, okay, it could be your noise. Was I just perceived as aggressive, or is that why they're responding this way? Finding a way to go back to the STATE method or the ABC method, all of these, and you can find so much of this now, right? Because thankfully, so much of this is top of mind right now for organizations, of how to approach these conversations so that you can ask questions to learn what you want to learn. But most importantly, too, it will always be on you also to educate. It shouldn't be. That's where exhaustion comes from. But if you choose to take that and you choose to do that, to create allies, that's also an opportunity for you to say, this is a story I'm telling myself right now. And then, this is what's making you think whatever it is that you're thinking. And if you have a good enough relationship, you can really learn from that.
Thank you. I'll definitely check out that Mary Winters, and you're right. What Amy said about clarifying really helps you, take a step back and make sure we're on the same page. Thank you for that, Talia.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you again, panel. Thank you again, participants. It was fun. I always enjoy hanging out with some really great women. I've been the beneficiary of their experience and stories. So thank you again, ladies. Y'all stay safe, stay well. Everybody take care. And look for the next webinar that the Steven Stagner Sales Excellence Institute will be hosting. Have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thank you, everyone.